What if I told you that your pitch deck could be silently sabotaging your chances of ever successfully raising startup capital? Today, what I'm going to be walking through is the investor's perspective of, what they look at when they receive decks, and quite frankly, the red flags that they see in all of the decks that they receive, because they receive literally thousands every single year, and only a few manage to actually capture their attention. So today, you're going to be learning exactly how to actually capture the investor's attention and potentially lead to a check getting written for your startup. Now, we've got a very fun agenda here today. So we've got three things we're going to be walking through. The first thing I'm going to be breaking down is the two different types of decks that you actually need if you're about to go and fundraise. Yes, there are two. If you're doing just one, then you're kind of mistaken. So I'm going to walk through what they are and exactly what you should be including each one of those. The second thing I'm going to do is basically walk through the three most common mistakes that I see startups make, and they're the things that make investors so frustrated when they receive decks like this. So we're going to be walking through all three of those things and make sure that you know to avoid them. And the third thing we're going to be walking through is the gold standard structure for every single deck. There's a structure that investors want. There are components in a deck that they want to see before they can even consider investing in your deal. And today I'm going to walk you through exactly what ones those are. I'm even going to give you a template that's downloadable below for you to be able to use for yourself and increase the chances of you raising capital. So quick background on myself. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Establish. And over the last 12 months, we've worked with nearly 150 startups to help with their fundraising, anywhere from pre-seed all the way through Series A. During that time, we published over 1,000 articles, getting those startups featured in all different news outlets. We've also set up over 3,500 investor meetings, and we've been helping them with all of their assets. So pitch deck, one pager, the actual pitch, you name it, I've been able to see it all over 100 times. And most excitingly, we've been able to raise nearly $100 million for the clients that we've been able to work with through all of these efforts. So what I'm going to be giving you in this channel is essentially all of the lessons that I've learned from looking at a lot of companies doing the same type of thing through fundraising. And what you're going to get by following this channel is essentially the fast-tracked version of trying to raise capital. There's a lot that goes into trying to raise money, and I'm essentially going to show you the do's and the don'ts. So with that being said, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment below if there's a specific thing that you would like to hear about, and let's dive into today's video. First things first. There are two decks that you need to have. All right, it's not just one pitch deck and a one pager, it is actually two pitch decks. It's not even counting the one page. Okay, and if you don't know what a one pager is, it's okay. I got you. We'll talk about it later. So the first deck that I want to dive in is what I call the I have not gotten a meeting yet deck. Okay, so sometimes it's like, people, when they hear that, they might think, a non-con versus a con. I'm not talking about that. I think that is, up to your discretion in terms of how proprietary you think your information is. However, what I am talking about is the deck that is meant to build intrigue and curiosity, rather than the longer deck that is actually built to get an investment. All right. So I'll get more specific here in a sec. So when it comes to the I've not gotten a meeting yet deck, this is what you're actually sending out to investors prior to you having a proper pitch. So this is going to be the deck that you send when you're not narrating. It's purely up to the imagination of the investor to read and be like, is this going to be worth my time to have a conversation or an actual meeting with this investor? Different scenarios that you'd be using this in is when you're doing cold outreach. This is going to be when you're doing warm intros. This is going to be when you're doing pitch competitions at events, when there's a very small amount of time to actually present what you're doing. And what I want you to do really quick is guess how many slides this should be. Any guesses? 6. I recommend 6 or 7 slides. So it is a very, very short deck. And if you're like, Michael, there's no way that I can concisely get my startup down into 6 or 7 slides. Yes, you can. And in fact, that is actually when you know you're doing it right. It's when you feel like this isn't enough information that you have the actual correct length of initial deck that you're going to be sending out. Again, the I have not gotten a meeting deck, right? That's what you want it to be. So I'll tell you about the components that I think go into this, and then we'll just keep rolling so we're not on this too long. But essentially what it's going to be is the title, problem that you clearly explain the problem, but also why people will pay for it, solution, traction, team, go to market, and then the ask and use of funds. So that's 7, right? And what I would say 6 or 7 for is, if one of those points is not as strong for you, or if one point is more strong to where you feel the need to include it, then that's what you're going to send. Look, it's your best foot forward, right? It's like, hey, here is what we have going on at a very high level. Just enough information for the investor to be like, yes, I want to learn more. I want to dive deep. I want to take you past this point of just hitting the trash button and replying to you and saying no thank you, right? So really what you need is just the very high level overview, and that is extremely overmissed because if you try and add too much information too early, what it does is it makes an investor make a decision at too early of a stage, right? So they think that they have enough information to make an educated decision. So if you have 10, 12, 14 slides in your initial pre-conversation deck, the teaser deck, as I call it, then they're going to think that they have all of the facts so that they can make a decision, when that is the last thing you want, right? Because you want them to buy into you as the founder. That's what this pre-seeds game is all about, Series A even. It's like build a little bit of intrigue into the actual business, have the metrics there that get someone excited, and then we want them to make the decision on you as a founder, as a doer, as a builder, as an executor of this vision. So make sure that you have a very short, concise, clear deck for that. And if you want to be really fancy with this, what I've actually seen work really well, it's called a video sales letter, okay? A video sales letter is essentially when marketers create videos that are very, very curated for an outcome. So it would just be you reading through your pitch. And what I would recommend is that video being under 3 minutes, and it's literally you walking through those 6 slides and showing them the energy that you have as a founder and explaining the points one by one. And then you send the deck, but aside, hey, for your convenience, here's a brief walkthrough of each one of these slides. How much more professional do you seem if you have that versus someone who just sends like a 14-page, God forbid, a 30-slide deck, which we'll get into here in a sec. And yeah, like it's essentially your elevator pitch, right? I say VSL because I'm a marketer by trait, and I think that there's a lot of principles that you can use from the framework of a VSL to make that really effective. However, it is really just an elevator pitch to try and get them excited about what you're doing. Now, like I said, keep that video short or else it's going to be a super watch rate, and it can actually have a negative impact on your ability to have investors reply to you. So be careful with that. And the second deck is what you're going to share when you're actually presenting. So it's going to be when you have a more formal meeting. It's going to be when you actually are walking them through one by one. If you want to give them a visual representation of what it is that you're talking about, it's kind of a supportive step for you. So the deck, it's going to be more encompassing of what the actual business is. It's the things that you need them to know in order to make an educated decision. So again, like the teaser deck and then like the actual full presentation deck, you need both or else you're going to be in a sticky situation. Now, if you'd like to see a video where I actually coach a client on deck improvements, rather the teaser or on the full, slide by slide, let me know in the comments below, and I'm happy to record one where I literally walk through one by one and give specific examples so you're all able to know. With that being said, let's dive back into the video. And what I want to dive into now are the 3 biggest mistakes that I see, and I'll breeze through these because some of these might be obvious, but they're less obvious than you might think. And the issue is founders always think, oh, I'm not doing this, or oh, I would never. And yet, like I said, we've seen over 150 decks this last year, and the amount of times that these 3 mistakes occur is astronomical. And sometimes, you know, you have blinders on, right? Like you're focused on building the business, the product, marketing, and so forth, to where fundraising's an afterthought, and it can't be an afterthought. It has to be something that you devote time to, almost a full-time job, which is tricky when you're such an early company. So let's talk about mistake number 1. This is that you think that the deck is too important. Okay? You think that this deck is going to be the thing that gets an investor to actually write a check for you. Sometimes I see people, you know, put so much effort into a deck and they put every single last detail. It's their actual pitch, right? So there is a deck, but then there is a pitch, different. So what I mean by that is the deck is a visual aid for the pitch, okay? You, as the founder of the presentation, you're the person that's actually going to be up there, charismatic, confident, excited, building intrigue, telling the story that people can represent. The deck simply is a supporting element of what you're doing, okay? So sometimes I see people think that, oh, if I just change this one slide, I'm going to be able to get all these investors. And it's silly. You know, the deck's not going to change the game, which we'll get into more templates at the end of this and specifics. But I, you know, just don't think that it's that important to where you need to have the perfect deck. You're never going to get there. Okay. And again, this is why we have 2 different decks. The one that you send without your voice needs to have more words and quite frankly, be a little bit more intuitive for the investor to be able to look at it and be like, okay, this is the actual traction. This is the problem. This is the solution. However, the deck that you make for yourself when you're going to be presenting should have more graphs, more images, and just supporting text to kind of remind you what you're saying throughout the presentation. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see is people think that this deck is going to be the make or break for them raising money when it's really just how attractive can you make your business sound at this early of a stage? That's what they care about. And so yeah, just make sure that you don't put too much emphasis on the deck being the thing that's going to get investors involved, because you're mistaken. Mistake number 2, let's talk about it. So mistake number 2 is having way too many slides. Okay, now this is a very important thing. So I am actually not anti-slides. Some people are anti-slides, and that leads into a whole nother area, because if you give yourself 10 slides to put all of your information in, but you're adding more information onto each slide, and there's like a paragraph on each slide, that's actually worse than just having 20 slides that are actually really digestible and are really well formulated. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that you should always try and do less first and then slowly expand extra slides. But I see companies that literally have 30 to, I think that I've seen up to 70 slides in a deck. 70 slides. It is mad. Who in their right mind is going to look through 70 slides? Okay. And here's what I always get. Michael, my company has a lot to it. I need to make sure they understand this. I need to make sure they understand this. No, it means that you have a problem with your ability to articulate what you're doing simply. If you can't talk about a complex issue in simple terms, you don't have mastery over it, right? And investors are looking for mastery over like subject matter experts, right? Like that's essentially masters. And your inability to articulate what you're building is probably one of the biggest turnoffs. So when an investor sees a deck that's 60, 70, even 30 slides, what it really shows is an immaturity as an entrepreneur, someone that doesn't really know what they're doing yet. And it's a big red flag. They're like, okay, this idea, even if it's great, it's not fleshed out enough for an outside investor to get involved. So that's why it's really important to make sure that you're able to concisely organize your thoughts in a way that communicates it without needing someone to read paragraphs of information. And quite frankly, it may be one of the biggest red flags for an investor for getting involved in your business, because they're never going to read it, right? I'm pretty sure that there was a stat by CB Insights where the average investor spends around a minute, maybe a minute and a half looking at any deck. So if they're giving you a minute of their time to digest information and you have 20 slides with a ton of text on each slide, then there's no chance that they're actually going to have any real takeaways, right? Like, investors are busy. So you need to optimize your deck for a busy person that spends a minute to a minute and a half reading. That's what you gotta do. So with that being said, let's dive into mistake number 3. Mistake number 3 is using deck not being ready as an excuse for a lack of action. Now, this kind of is similar to what I started saying in mistake number 1. However, what I see sometimes is people delay action because like, our deck's not ready. I'm redoing this. I'm redoing the color scheme. And it kind of leaks into, well, now I have to redo my LinkedIn. I have to redo my website. Relax. Like I said in the very beginning, the deck is not going to be the thing that makes or breaks it. Like, I would care a lot less about the actual design of your deck and way more about just like, again, the very clear steps that we're about to cover here in this template, where it's like, if you just clearly articulate this, you're going to naturally get investor meetings as long as your idea has some substance to it. Again, you have to preface all of this with the fact that your business has to be investable. If what you're building is not exciting nor a venture scale opportunity, then no investor is going to waste their time. So given that you have at least a little bit of traction and you are building something that's exciting, if you follow this, you're golden. So, and at the end, what I'm actually going to be showing you are some of the top unicorn decks out there. And what you're going to see is they aren't fancy. Some of them are very underwhelming and some of them, don't get me wrong, are made in 2000s and the first version of PowerPoint. And that might be why. However, they communicate things very simply. And the more inspiration that you can take from simple communicated decks of successful companies in the past, the higher the chances are that you're going to be creating a deck that is worthwhile and that makes investors understand what you're doing. So with that being said, let's dive into the gold standard of investor decks. And, like I said, I'm going to be giving you my template, but I'm going to supply you with a Y Combinator link as well. That way you can just check it out there. Theirs is a little bit different, but similar to what it is that we recommend, and use what you feel is right. There is no template that is perfect. However, there are individual components that go into a deck that cannot be missed if an investor is going to be making an educated decision. So let's dive into my screen here, and I'll be walking through just, like I said, the gold standard as well as the template that we use. So I'm going to fly through this. Again, this is down in the description, but Y Combinator even gives a very straightforward example of what they want to see for seed capital. And, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 slides. So there you go. They recommend about 10 slides. I say 8 to 10 is a very good place to start. And if you, go into the 12 to 15 range, especially when you have more cool stuff going on in your business, then that's totally acceptable. Don't feel like you can't have a slide if you feel like it adds value. Sometimes some of these pitch gurus out there, these pitch deck gurus, they're like, if you don't have an 8-slide deck, then you're totally screwed. It's like, okay. So let's find more examples of that being wrong. So what I want to just show you here is samples of slides, and feel free to download this. That way you can use it for yourself. Again, you don't need to use all of these. What you want to do is have a deck kind of custom to what is unique for your business and that you think makes you unique in the market. And that's what makes decks kind of tricky is if you try and copy Uber's deck, the things that made Uber aren't what make you, you. So you need to make sure that when you are creating a deck, it has your own personality in it. It has to have your own little flair. It's not going to actually be very well received. So again, everyone should know this, all right? There is a title page. Wild. And so have your logo, have the company name, and then just explain what you do in 5 to 7 words. Like try and think of the most one-liner thing that you can for your company. For instance, here at Establish, what we say is we get early stage founders, capital, and credibility. Pretty straightforward. Kind of builds intrigue, curiosity. It doesn't give them everything, but it tells you a little bit. So moving on from this more obvious slide. So the next slide is going to be the problem or the business opportunity. So what is it that you're solving? And, sometimes people talk about the problem and solution very wrong. And here, what I would try and do is have 1 to 3 bullets. And then ideally icons or images or supporting graphs or an image of some kind. Again, the less words that you have, sometimes the better. And, one of the most important things that you need to have when it comes to the problem and solution slide, which that's the next one, which I'll show you in a sec, you have to explain why people are willing to pay for it. Okay. And whether you want to have this be part of your pitch, right? Or if you're going to be able to actually write that out in your teaser slide, you need to make sure that, because there's plenty of problems out there that exist that people aren't actually willing to pay for, right? And investors know that. If you're going to be a business that they invest in, you have to have a path to profit. So make sure you're always talking about where the money's at, because if you don't have a logical case for where the money's at, then they believe less and less and less that it's something that they should get involved in. So explain the problem that you're solving. What have you discovered that other companies have not? Why are you the one that's solving this problem? That's essentially what you need to get across here in a very simple way. And then the solution is, mirroring what it is that you just put out on the problem slide. What are the benefits that you've created and no one else has created? And why is this the greatest thing that's ever existed? Why is this the thing that no one else can duplicate easily? And how is this something that people are actually going to pay for? Why is this something that people could adopt into their everyday life and want to pay for it willingly, right? Product. This is a more optional slide. So if there's specific features that you want to call out, explain what it is that you do, the specifics of what it is that you've built, features and benefits. So if there's anything specific about that has to be differentiated from other competitors, other products out there that may seem similar, or, sometimes, we have clients that, get their product actually gets miscategorized. And what I mean by that is people think that it's this type of product when it's actually that type of product. And they sound similar, and the way that they're solving that problem is completely different. And because of that, you want to make sure that there's no room for misinterpretation, right? If there's room for misinterpretation, then sometimes having more specifics around the product being different from other products can be really helpful. So audience and use cases. This one's really cool because sometimes what you'd want to do here is actually talk about how the investor that you're speaking with would be able to use it. So the more real that you can make this and tie into the story that you're telling of your product, the more that the investor is going to resonate, right? If they can literally think, this is something that I would use, don't you think that there's a much higher chance that they would want to get involved? And again, so even if it's not something that they would use, is it something that their child would use? Is it something that their grandmother would use? Is it something that their friends, family, associates of any kind can use? Find a use case that you can tie to make it more real. Things sound fictional until they're real, right? Until you anchor it to something that's real that makes us believe that it's possible. So finding a use case is a really underrated way to get someone really bought in. The next thing is business model. I know this sounds crazy, but people don't talk about how they make money. So sometimes I hear, these really long-winded pitches, and they're like, and we're going to be doing this. This is who our user base is going to be, and this and this and this. And it's like, great, where are you making money? And then they're like, well, they're going to be paying for it. Okay, how? Why? Where? Explain it. And sometimes this is tricky when you're a founder and you haven't sold it yet, right? But you have to really think through, how are we going to make money? Actually. So the more clear you are there, the better. And then of course, traction. Traction is the buzzword that every investor is looking for in the world right now. Okay. The more traction you have, the easier it is to raise money. Traction can be determined by just product state. So whether it's past certain rounds of, regulation approvals, whether it's, sales, obviously, customers, wait lists, users, whatever it may be, the more traction that you can show, the better. Obviously, the most powerful form of traction is always money. If you're getting paid for something, investors are always like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let's look into that. And, the more that you can try and do that at an earlier stage, the better. Now, this is an often skipped slide, okay? So it's typically these previous two, traction and business model, that I'll see way more regularly than their go-to-market. And, the go-to-market is really important because, well, there's two reasons. One, it's typically tied into what you're raising funds for, right? So typically what people are doing is they're raising money for marketing or sales teams or something along those lines. And they try and talk about their go-to-market like it's easy, okay? There's nothing easy about a go-to-market strategy. There's nothing easy about it at all. And investors know that. And if you're asking for money for a go-to-market strategy that's completely untested, they're completely unwilling to give you that money. All right. So what you want to do is in your go-to-market piece, you want to show what validation you have of your existing strategy and how you're going to use money that they give you to continue to scale on top of that. So the more that you can validate a go-to-market strategy at a small level, it gives the inclination to an investor that, okay, if I added money to this, what happens to those numbers? With ads, they know it's inevitably going to actually get worse with scale. So how are you going to show them that you have such good performance right now with ads where even with scale, it's still worth it, right? So you need to make sure that your go-to-market strategy is very sound, and it's not just, oh, I'm going to hire this person, I'm going to hire that person, and they're going to figure it out, because that can help. And obviously hiring talent is life-changing for a startup. It's also not the thing that's always going to work. You need to validate something before you try and scale it. If you don't do that, then it's typically a recipe for disaster. Next thing, market size. TAM is a pillar of any deck. It has to be a venture scale opportunity, something that's going to provide 100x to 1000x for any investor, or else they're not even going to consider getting involved. Make sure it's not insane data that you're pulling. Make sure in terms of it's fake. You need to make sure that this makes logical sense, or else you're going to just sound silly. Milestones are a roadmap, a more optional one. Competitors are a good thing. Competitors are a validation of the market actually working. So a really great example of this is this AI wave that we're going through right now. A lot of people know about Jasper, right? The AI copywriting and writing platform for marketers and so forth. And, Jasper blew up. I think they raised $100 and something million. But what's amazing is how many little companies got funded an extra $5 to $30 million off of a similar premise. However, they have a different niche that they're in, or they have a different competitive advantage. And, sometimes you see a competitor and you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about them, I'm going to ignore that they exist. No. You want these investors to know that there is competition, because what that does is it validates that there's a market. Sometimes if there's no competitors, one, either lying to yourself or have not done sufficient amount of research, or two, there might be a reason. And that scares investors. If they don't understand why there's no other people that are doing this, that's a bad thing. So with that, let's move into competitive advantages. So with competitors, make sure you're outlining what it is that you do differently. That way it doesn't just sound like a copy. The team, this is a very important slide, of course. The better the team, the more likely it is that they're going to invest in you. So talking about previous successes with previous companies, accolades, universities, competitions you've won, previous success determines future success in a lot of investors' eyes. Financial projection, I'm excited about this one. I could probably create a whole video, and I might, specifically about financial projections. Now, financial projections are important because you need to show that you're a venture scale opportunity. Something, if they give you money, they're going to make a bunch of money, similar to TAM, right? However, if you go from from $0 to $200 million in a year, and that is what you're saying your financial projections are, you're out of your mind, okay? So if you literally don't make any logical sense, if there is no reasoning for how you are going to continue to scale and make more money, again, you're immature as an entrepreneur and they won't want to invest in you. So this is an important slide to make sure that you are logical with. Now, here's another really important slide. Ask and use for funds. First, have one number. I'm not raising $1 to $3 million. No, have one number. They're like, well, why would I give you more when I could give you less? Why do you need less? Is that going to be enough? Or are you going to have to ask for more money down the road? Like, that's annoying, right? Have a freaking number, one number, whether it's $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, do it. Commit to that number and that's your round. In addition, what are you going to use the money for? The more clear you can be here, the better. And this is where like the teaser can be an overview, but make sure that when you're actually presenting this, you're talking about specifics. This is where this money is going to go. I'm going to have 20% allocated to sales. What my plan is for sales is boom, 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 boom. Plan for marketing, boom, 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 boom. We're going to double down on this existing acquisition channel to make sure we're bringing in new customers for this price. And then we're going to spend about 10% of that total budget testing out all of these little things, right? So what people are looking for here is, did you just make this number up? Or is there a real reason that you're asking for it, right? You need to ask for money that you need, and that's about it. And that's what you should do as a founder. And then if you want to just end on company logo and contact information, that's essentially what I would recommend for every single deck. Now, I don't want to dive into this video too long. However, these are the things that you need, okay? So download this template and it's going to help you a lot. Make sure that you're not just carbon copying it. Obviously, like we made it kind of ugly so people wouldn't do it. And the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with is check out this link down below. Like you can literally look at unicorns pitch decks. The amount of people that don't even just do a Google search blows my mind. Like here, you can actually see Tinders, right? If we go back, you can see all unicorns based on stage. So just look at their seed stage. And what's crazy is people don't even Google this. Like you're actually able to see all of these different companies. Like for instance, Van Gogh. Great. Let's check out their deck. This is what it is. The fastest growing marketplace. Look at how easy and simple this is. There's like such few words. Doesn't that just kind of blow your mind when you look at these? And you know, again, like this is where it's important because not a lot of people realize there's no magical deck. And all of these guys out there that are selling you pitch deck like building services are going to say, oh, this is going to be the one that's going to make it. It's about being effing clear, okay? If you're concise, clear, and you're building something cool, people will give you money. Thank you everyone for checking this out. Make sure you like, subscribe, click down below for more startup fundraising tips. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.